All right, sources are now telling Fox News today that there are a few scenarios where the White House may ask to see the Mueller report before the Attorney General, Bill Barr, hands it over to Congress. Now, that has some of the president's critics going ballistic here, and they say that, that's not right. That shouldn't be the way it is. So former Whitewater independent counsel Robert Ray on all of this. Is there precedent for the White House seeing a report focused on the White House first?
Well, sure, although a little context, it was under the independent counsel statute. That was a statute written by Congress which provided that once the report was finalized, it was submitted to the special division of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and then anyone named in the report had an opportunity before its public release to prepare and file written comments to that report, which would then be included prior to the time that the report was released. A long way of saying that obviously if the president is the focus of attention in that report, generally speaking, the idea is fairness would dictate that he'd be given an opportunity to see it in advance and prepare a response. Now, I understand the White House has already been in the process through the president's lawyers of preparing such a response.
Do you think they've already seen it?
I don't think they've seen it. Okay. But I don't know that the Attorney General needs my advice, but if I were providing advice, I mean, it's sort of in the concept, generally speaking, of due process and fairness. He should have an opportunity to respond. In order to effectively do that, I think the better course would be on a limited basis through his lawyers under a very short time frame without recording devices or electronic devices, an opportunity in a room to see an advanced copy of the report.
But Democrats say by giving him that, special attention, he is going to put out his spin first on a report.
Well, I could imagine the Attorney General making a condition of that early access that the White House agrees not to have any comment until such time as the report is released.
The White House
publicly.
Or anyone would honor that. It's so tempting not to, right?
Well, sure, but I mean, you have to hopefully depend on.
Well, how did it
good
go back
faith
in the Bill Clinton days when you were handling that? How was that report released and how did it?
Well, it was controlled by a court, the special division, per the statute that Congress enacted, which has since lapsed as of 1999. But the concerns that animated the whole notion of a final report, I think, are still present, notwithstanding the fact that the statute has lapsed.
I know it's a little bit like legal apples and oranges, but did the White House, the Clinton White House at the time, have access to that before the general public?
In effect, yes.
And did the White House then try to put its own spin on that first?
Through its lawyers, those individuals were able to comment. They didn't, jump the gun, so to speak, in commenting in advance of the release of the final report. In other words, they followed the mandate and the directive of a court, which was that there would be no release of the report until such time as everyone had a chance to comment, and if they chose to do so, they could do so in writing, and those written submissions would be included as part of the final report.
But you can't release the entire report because names and positions would be jeopardized. So how do you handle what gets out there versus what doesn't?
Well, in a couple of ways, of course. Again, the independent counsel statute drove that because it provided the court with the authority to release the report. Here, this is the Attorney General making some determination as to what can be released with regard to grand jury information. It would behoove the Attorney General, obviously, to seek a court order if it seeks to authorize the release publicly of any of that information or redact it. And then in this particular investigation, a little more complicated by the fact that there exists at least the potential that there's national security information contained in what Bob Mueller transmits to the Attorney General. Obviously, those materials would have to be redacted. And then finally, I suppose there's the possibility that there could be a claim of executive privilege and or information that might have to be redacted because it would potentially jeopardize an ongoing criminal investigation in the Southern District of New York or elsewhere.
Does public opinion, or did it back then, weigh on you? And I only mention that because right now, half Americans think this is a witch hunt, that the president's right. Does that weigh on however that final report comes out?
I don't know about public opinion, but certainly public sentiment about they're maximizing the likelihood, which is what your object is, that your findings and your determinations will come to be respected and accepted by the general public, however you come out, whether you decided to bring charges or whether you decided not to bring charges. I think that's still an important consideration. I mean, I wasn't guided by public opinion polls, but I was certainly...
I don't think you cared.
I didn't, but I think I was certainly guided, though, by what I hope to be, public sentiment of people paying careful attention and hoped that there would be a recognition and an acceptance of what it is I had decided and what I had done.
You were unflappable in those days. You're still unflappable. Robert Ray,
I try.
The former Whitewater Independent Counsel, very calm guy. I think you want that in these kind of positions.
In the wake of one of the biggest scandals involving money and power and privilege at the most prestigious American universities, questions are now being raised about whether everyone is kind of getting scammed. Those who play by the rules and get into college often just see the costs go up and up every year. And they graduate with a mountain of debt that can hold them back in every way. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum, and tonight this is the story. The president has proposed one answer, new limits on the amount of money that families can borrow for college. But a prior president's head of the Office of Management and Budget is a cost cutter from way back. He earned the nickname the Blade in his days in the Bush White House. He is now the president at Purdue University. He has frozen tuition costs during his tenure. He gives students a very unique way to pay off their debt after they leave. He's even brought Amazon to campus, which has dramatically lowered exorbitant textbook costs by 30%. Earlier, I spoke with the man that the Wall Street Journal calls the most innovative university president in America today, former governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels. I asked him about what he is doing.
We decided a few years ago, when I arrived, I just asked the question, why don't we start trying to adjust our spending to our students' families' budgets and not expecting them to adjust their budgets to our spending. So far, so good. We've just finished we're finishing our 6th year of no tuition increase. We've promised at least 2 more, and over that time we have reduced the cost of room, board, and books. So it'll be less expensive to attend Purdue in 2021 in nominal unadjusted dollars than it was in 2012. Consequently, student debt is falling, and a record percentage of our students left last year with 0 debt.
That's amazing.
That's the starting point on this very serious problem you're talking about.
You know, and you're doing something called an income share agreement after students leave. How does that work?
Think of it as equity, not debt. We wanted an alternative to debt. An income share agreement is simply a contract in which the student, after leaving for a fixed number of years at a fixed percentage, 3%, 5%, 6% of whatever their income is, pays back the investor that way. We, Purdue, put up the first money because we believe in being accountable, and we believe and we know that our students are going to do well. But the essence of an income share agreement is it's not debt, and the risk shifts entirely from the student. The risk of a slow start to a career, for instance, shifts entirely from the student to the investor.
That's amazing. And you say if the student is not making, if they're making less than $20,000 a year, then they don't pay anything back at that point, correct?
That's right. They don't pay anything. And on the other end, if a student gets off to a fast start in the career, there's a limit, an upper limit on what they would ever be expected to pay. But the essence is it's a voluntary agreement, unlike debt, which just piles up whether you're doing well or not doing well. Your payment is an amount, a percentage you've agreed you could afford, and it fluctuates with your income.
You know, you've said some very strong things about the way that other universities are running things, and that you describe it as basically a racket, that you can just keep charging more and more and more, and you made some comparisons to the way that healthcare works. Can you explain that?
Right. Well, sometimes maybe I get a little sarcastic. It's not a racket. It's an extraordinarily important asset to America. Our higher ed institutions are still an area of competitive advantage. But there are comparisons to healthcare, I think, which is the business I was in for a very long time, and to me they're inescapable. You have a product which is deemed a necessity, just got to have that college degree. You have a total pricing power. The buyer cannot tell what a high-quality education is. And in fact, buyers in the past have, in the absence of any other evidence, have used the sticker price as a proxy. Right. If college A costs more, it must be better. There's no evidence of that. And finally, if you flood a marketplace with third-party subsidies and that either immunize or at least insulate customers from the real cost of what they're buying, then they tend to overconsume it. And so we've seen it in healthcare, we've seen it in education. It's not an accident that the only things that have gone up faster in the American economy for the last 2 or 3 decades, faster than healthcare, are college tuition, college room and board, and college books.
It's incredible. It's up 500% over the last several years. And, you know, I don't know if you're that popular at the president of university conferences that you go to when you're driving costs down, sir, but you're doing some very interesting things that I hope they're listening to.
Well, we don't prescribe what we're doing at Purdue for anyone else. We were put here as a land-grant school to open up and democratize higher ed. We believe being affordable and accessible is central to our mission. But what's working very well for us, record applications and so forth. But we don't preach or prescribe.
Well, former governor, of course, of Indiana, and now president of Purdue University, Mitch Daniels. Thank you very much, sir. Great having you here tonight.